Welcome, everyone, to part two of our podcast with Suzanne Natbony, an LA attorney with Solve to Win. And what's the other entity? Or
Solve and win. We solve problems and we win cases. That's the client's always calling me for one of those two issues.
all right, sounds great.
My last name's complicated, so I try. Still, you're messing up my name and my firm, so
I'm sorry. Oh, now I feel bad, but
it's okay.
I got the pronunciation of your name correct, right?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, Alliant is what they refer to themselves in Europe, but I understand. I call it Alliant. That's the firm that I'm with, but I have my own firm too. So.
All right, sounds great. Uh, before we talked about issues to consider, employment contracts, do you ask first? Do you ask for forgiveness later? Let's briefly go through an intellectual property roadmap that you want to consider, because it might not be just an invention. It could be some materials. It could be some trade secrets. If you can quickly go through the different types of intellectual property that someone might want to consider. And I understand this is not going to be comprehensive by any stretch.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of my business clients, are entrepreneurs. They're starting their businesses, and one of my intake questionnaire questions is, "Do you have any intellectual property?" And they're like, "What is that?" So I'm like, patents. It could be, a design or utility patent, and so
I mean, a lot of people don't know the difference between the two, and it'd be a bit much to go into that now, but
yeah,
there's
right.
a lot under even just patents. Then design patents kind of overlap potentially with copyrights, I would say.
Yes, so I am not a patent attorney. I do not prosecute patents. That would be John Weatherspoon's area, but I do have several
And
patents.
mine.
Yes, you need to talk to a patent attorney. That's why shoot them over to someone like John. And I just warn them, don't publicly disclose the idea if it's potentially patentable, and then also you could file a trademark, which could be for a good or a service. It could be a name, or it could be, a slogan, and it could be design. And so are you doing a word mark, a design mark? And then, but the thing that actually comes up a lot is this actually used in commerce yet? Are you going to file this intent to use application, or is this already in commerce? And a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that issue, is that they actually have to be selling it interstate. So the doctors that are my clients, like, are you advertising to out of state patients coming in to see you? You're just world renowned, doctor, and people are flying in from all over. It's not just California, although you can do a state trademark, but that's not as widely done. And then the copyright could be, designs, and you submit that to the copyright office to protect that, or it could be something like a script or photos, something like that, and that could be protected that way. And then you also mentioned trade secrets. This is something that, like the formula of Coca-Cola, that we don't want to share. It's a trade secret, and we have to keep it secret. And then you need NDAs, and maybe keep it in a vault, something like that. So
With respect to trade secrets, you do have to, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to keep it a secret. There's specific steps that you need to take, and there's kind of a list of them. Can you just name a couple of them?
to maintain it as a trade secret.
Right.
Um, Actually, I think you should talk about that point.
Oh, okay. All right. I
Yeah.
mean, one is to have a policy and to call it a trade secret. Another is to have very limited access to people who have access to it. And you have to take concrete steps to limit that access and mark it as a trade secret so that it's specifically part of the company policy. Or I guess, oh, we're talking about side hustles here, that you, like your client lists, and to not share it around and go to friends and just make it available. I mean, once you do like your blind CCs, or even CCs, you kind of lose some of that the more you share. And people today are so willing to share on Facebook and social media. And Instagram and LinkedIn and the like.
Yeah, I think it needs to be under NDA. Simple, just keep it. Do not share it. Keep it secret unless there's a paper trail showing that somebody signed an NDA to find out about it.
All right. And then, I mean, another thing, because people are very active with respect to websites and getting a good domain and maybe even filing a trademark on your domain name, especially if it's kind of a crowded area. Uh, Something to consider?
Sort of like troll an IP troll if they do that. Yeah, if I've seen people try to use like Google AdWords of like my clients, and so we send a cease and desist letter out if they're trying to capture leads that are now confused. Is it causing a likelihood of confusion for these consumers who think they're going to my client's business by going to this competitor's business who's using my client's name and their Google AdWords and people are clicking on it. So I've seen that. I mean, I know that it exists of the domain names of trying to, if like, for example, my company is Law Take. Well, we took like Law Taker, we took domain names similar to Law Take to prevent that. So that's something that an entrepreneur can do as well.
Yeah, it's something to consider. I mean, I have even for Stein IP. I mean, I unfortunately Stein Law was taken and Stein was taken, but I've got a few domain names that kind of surround and create a little picket fence for someone who even accidentally might want to take up a similar domain name.
Right. Yep. That's what I would suggest.
All right. Let's do structures for monetizing. Type of entity, things you should do once you've got your kind of ducks in a row, you kind of know I'm clear from my employer and um, I've got some idea of my intellectual property. What are some other things to consider as far as setting up an entity or whatever else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, California is expensive to set up an entity unless you can make the argument that it's not touching California. This is sort of online business or it's in another state, then a lot of people try to keep it out of California by going to Wyoming or Nevada. Delaware is not expensive, but if you're planning on raising capital from VCs, they prefer that. LLCs are usually easier. I actually have an LLC and I have the law corp, of course that can't be an LLC. So I know an LLC is a lot easier to for somebody who's I'm like a lawyer. I know all the ins and outs of having corporate compliance, and I'm like I prefer an LLC. And so, but not that doesn't work from a tax perspective. Sometimes it's a lot of accountants prefer the S corp for paying employee taxes and such. So it's a tax question. I always tell clients to talk to their tax, professional, and then we'll decide whether or not it should be an LLC or a corporation, and then whether it should be taxed as an S corp. And sometimes people get frustrated because they hear conflicting information, but that's just the way it is. You go to doctors, they tell you different opinions.
Right.
Same thing with lawyers. I mean, with me and my startup and when I started out, I talked to different people and I got different advice from different people, like, different lawyers. New York lawyer said, do an LLC. California lawyer said, do a California corporation. And then it was like, can you tax an LLC as an S corporation? And then the accountant's like, why would you do that? That's so complicated. So a lot of decisions and analysis paralysis for entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, like, it's always good to do a revenue projection and see what it's like to make the money that you're going to plan on making through a S corp or an LLC or a corporation, and then make the decision based on that. Or you can convert entities many times. You can, move a company out of the state if you're sick of paying the franchise taxes and stuff like that. So there's alternatives if you maybe change your mind later.
I would imagine it would make a difference on how many people, whether you have partners,
Yeah.
whether you have employees, whether you have like a lot of equipment or more of service. I mean, so it sounds like it'd be a collaboration of a tax attorney and a business attorney such as yourself.
Right. And then in California, you can't have professional LLCs. There's no such thing. So that's just prohibited. So like you can't have a medical practice out of an LLC or a law practice. And that people make that mistake because I mean, like literally came on to this client and they've been around for 5 years and they were doctors and they had an LLC because their accountant formed an LLC. And I'm like, you can't do that. It's
All
not
right.
allowed.
So what, you have to set up something like an S corp or?
Yeah, I told them
Yeah.
like they could have converted it, but I thought, you've been around for 5 years. I don't think it's a good idea to convert this. I think you should just form a new one. Like that way there's like clean break and you don't say like you were practicing unlawfully for 5 years and then converted it. That made no sense. So I we just formed a new entity. So
And I guess,
and
yeah,
transferred assets from one entity to the other.
all right. That's definitely state by state. On the East Coast, there's much more ability to do professional LLCs or professional limited liability partnerships or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's LP partnerships, limited partnerships. Usually I see those for like investment funds and real estate deals, but not as much for anything else.
all right. And the reason that we're setting up these entities is for liability protection, and then I assume that we need to make sure we don't intermingle funds. Like, what are the things? What are the big no-nos?
Yeah, I think it's good to have your assets owned by the entity. And I mean, like some people will just have a separate asset holding company. And so if you're starting out, like we start off with having your new entity that's separate from your employers. And but usually if once you're in that stage, it's your employer may find out about it. It's probably a good idea to let them know, like you formed this consulting company or this tennis brand and whatever it is. And it's completely separate and you're keeping a paper trail and you're making sure that everything is, you're not using any of your employer's assets or leads or clients, and that it's just totally separate. And actually, it's really great if you have your employer's blessing. I mean, they can be helpful to you, especially if it's different. I mean, I've seen that with some of my clients. They've given the blessing to their employees to do something different because their employee is actually a very good employee and does well at the job. And that's what all comes down to is we really like this employee because they're doing a great job. And if they're doing something else on the side, then we would like to help them with that because it helps us. So
Okay, very
that's
good
a good attitude to have, or maybe not. Maybe they're going to be cutthroat and they're going to be like, no, we want you chained to our, company and you don't can't do anything else. And you've got, the handcuffs and that's usually not the employer that I work for. I don't like to work for people who are jerks, but they are out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, pretty much that's all we have time for. Do you have any closing comments?
Um, I would just say, um, I would just say if you're an employee and you're like as a closing, um, statement, if you're truly interested in doing a side hustle and you have your current job, I think probably like the financial issue of all of this needs to make sense. So, a lot of startups fail because they didn't have enough financing and so if you're able to launch while you're still earning a living from your employer and not breach any employment agreement, then that's probably the best route that you can go because if you quit your job and it doesn't work out, you might be in a bad situation. So just to be careful of that, like, really do, because a lot of these clients who come to me, they're so clueless with doing revenue projections. And I'm like,
Yeah,
no, yeah, I'm like,
especially when it's their baby, it's like, oh my God, everyone's going to want this or everyone's going to need this. And maybe that's not the case, or they don't know how to price things, or they don't know how to promote.
exactly. So they really need to understand what it's going to cost and then what are they going to gain. And then they need to like kind of plan that out to see when would be the right time to leave their employer and have certain milestones in their head and planned out where if we don't hit this, I need to ditch this and go keep my day job.
Kind of
So
like if
that's
you're
my
going to do some Christmas kind of side hustle, don't start it in January right after Christmas.
it could take that long though to launch. I mean, I've seen some of these companies take forever.
All right.
So.
So
Yeah,
Suzanne, tell everyone how can you be reached? Email, website.
yeah. I'm on LinkedIn, Suzanne Natbony. You can find me on there. My website is sullivanwynn.com. My email is suzanne@lawyer.com. And that's the best way to reach me, email, LinkedIn, or website. So
All right, we're
thank you,
gonna
Michael.
post that so people can see that. And Suzanne, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I know we've uh, taken a little while, but I'm so glad to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you so much. And good luck to everybody out there.
All right, and to my audience, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, for Michael Stein for Unraveling Intellectual Property with Michael Stein. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.